5, 4, 3, 2, 1, fire. The only thing we have to fear is fear.
Mile 18.
This is Endurance Nation. Hello there, and welcome to another episode of the Endurance Nation podcast. I'm Coach Patrick, your host on these different episodes that cover interviews with our members and with industry leaders, as well as regular topics that are pertinent to endurance athlete success. This time around, it's getting close to the fall, and I wanted to let you know that our season is kicking off on November 1st. That's right. Endurance Nation works through seasons, and our winter training program kicks off in earnest on November 1st. If you head over to endurancenation.us, you'll be able to enter your email address to get all the details about what's coming up and learn why starting in November is super important and how we can work with you over the course of the winter using our patented out-season program and the subsequent training phases of the year to create the conditions and knowledge you need to be your better and faster self. And if you're ready to get started early, can't wait till November 1st, we have a durability program for you too. So once again, head over to endurancenation.us, enter that email, learn more about what we are doing here over the course of the year, why Endurance Nation is different, why training with a team is the way to go, and how we can help make you successful. Until then, I look forward to hearing from you online somewhere, and sit back here now and enjoy this episode.
Endurance Nation.
All right, we are live. Hello, everyone. Coach Patrick here from Endurance Nation, back with another episode. I'm calling it the DudeGuy Podcast because we haven't come up with a name yet, with my co-conspirator here, Matt. Matt, how you doing on this fine Friday?
Doing great. I'm doing great. I'm excited to be on DudeGuy.
DudeGuy. Hey, listen, not everyone gets to be on DudeGuy, mostly because no one's heard of DudeGuy. But still, we're super excited to have you back. Can't believe you came back. Like, what are the odds that you decided to come back to DudeGuy? All right. So for those of you who are new, typically Endurance Nation, I run a weekly show where I talk about endurance training and racing topics, all those sorts of things. You can tune in for the podcast. They range from 10 to 20 minutes. And the whole design there is to get you really thinking intentionally about your training, making good decisions. We talk about frameworks and strategies, all the good stuff to make yourself a better athlete. In the DudeGuy podcast series, a little more conversational, a little more fun, and we dive into some of the relevant topics of the day, the stuff that normally we talk about inside Endurance Nation in the community. And we say, oh, look at that dumpster fire over there. Well, now we get to talk about it on air, which is super exciting. So I've got my list and Matt's got his list. I think last time we went with my topic first. So do you want to go first? What do you got? You got something good this week or what? I have two topics.
Well, you can decide. I got two. So I got a science project that I ran with my water bottles in the name of public safety. And then I got we could talk about that, and we could talk about writing the ship. But so I got a thing about writing the ship. So you could those are kind of like two doors you can choose from.
All right, let's tell me about this science experiment. Like, are you getting into like the BPA, chemicals in the plastic that are murdering you?
Oh, I wish I was that. I wish I was that sophisticated. No, This one is. I have some favorite water bottles that I really enjoy using, and I struggled to get the mold out of the bottom of those bottles, and it always kind of creeped me out. Like, hey, and I put them in the dishwasher, and I can't get this stuff out of the bottom of the bottle. So I tried a bunch of different things, and I can tell you my best secret to getting that. To saving your favorite water bottle, even if it's got the mold at the very, very bottom, is really, really, really hard to get out. Okay, well, let's take us back for a second here. Some folks can't see. So, do you the water bottles? Are they just sort of generic cycling water bottles? Or are they generic? Bottles? The big 24, 28 ounce bottles, the really long one. The bigger ones. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So I have a couple that I really, they have been on a lot of long rides with me, and I like to keep them. I'm emotionally attached to those water bottles. I've been very successful with them. I'd like to continue to use them, but it was grossing me out a little bit that I couldn't get get them clean like I wanted to. Like they went through the dishwasher, whole 9 yards.
Not so much. So, that's tough. That's tough, especially because you see it. This is the thing. The folks who don't know, the folks who know. The folks who know that you are drinking the water bottle. And you kind of notice that there is some mold in the water bottle, and you're still like, but I sure am thirsty right now, and I I don't have cleaning supplies. How bad is this water right now? I kind of need to keep drinking it. For now, hopefully I'm, gastrointestinally strong enough to resist whatever this mold is. All right. So your water bottle probiotic killing solution.
So I had the little scrubby bottle thing, the bottle scrubber, like you can buy at the store and stuff like that. And that thing, for whatever reason, like it doesn't do its job. It can't get to the bottom. I mashed that thing to the bottom of the bottle. So whatever, that mold is tough. So it ended up being like, a Google search and a couple different, best bottle cleanings videos, but some baking soda. Put some baking soda in there, a baking soda in a bowl, and then some rice, and you kind of make a paste of that stuff. So it's very little water with the baking soda, because a little water goes a long way, but because you want to look so you're trying to make like a paste of this stuff with rice, and then you pour that mixture into the bottom of the bottle and you push it around with the wooden spoon. Works wonders, man. Cleanest bottle I've had in a while. It's like, super easy. Took me like 10 or 15 minutes, and now I don't have to be grossed out about my water bottles. And like,
nice.
It was super easy to do. Yeah. So now I have extended my life of my water bottle, because that was anyway, there's just a bunch of mold that I couldn't get out of the bottom of that thing, man. It was super permanent, but not anymore. Not against rice and baking soda paste.
RicePaste. I like it. RicePaste. We need to come up with a better name than that.
Push it around.
The DudeGuy Podcast can't say RicePaste. That's not good. We'll have to come back to that. So how long were you like looking at this mold before you decided to take action? Like, how bad did it have to get?
I tried to take action on this a couple different times. I mean, I ran them through the dishwasher. Like I said, I had this stupid water bottle brush, did that for a little while. And then like, I could get after it with like the blunt end of the knife or whatever. Like that scratches the water bottle surface, and then like that makes it worse, because now the rubber surface is scratched, and then the mold has a place to hang on to. So that probably compounded my problem. But anyway, so I tried vinegar, I tried bleach, man. That plus you gotta rinse it really good if you use that stuff, or else it gets a little tasty. So this is a much safer option, and it took me all of about 5 minutes, and I'm much happier now. And now I can take my water bottles with me on my long ride again.
I love that. All right, very cool. What else do you think you could possibly? I will say those brushes, those water bottle brushes, are a total scam, because they're flimsy. So you got this thing, and you take out the package, like it's perfect. It's 1.5 feet long. My water bottle is 1 foot long. I can just get in there, and you stick it in there, and then it just bends. And you're like, no. I need to jab at this stuff. And it's like, and it's just all, and you're like, this is not working. Like maybe I'm doing it wrong. No, you're not doing it wrong. Like those brushes were totally designed for something else, and they're not working. So they're like, who could we sell this to? And it's like, water bottle cleaners. Everybody loves water bottles. We'll just sell these over here instead, because nobody's buying these things to clean like little tiny air ducts anymore, because it's just some stupid, ridiculous little brush. Yeah, I hear you. I've had some pretty pesky water bottles as well, that don't like to play nice, and especially the ones that are solid. I prefer the clear bottles so I can see what's inside of them, just the contents of them. But if you can't see inside of it, you're literally it's just like it's a mold factory just waiting to happen. Especially for folks who do longer rides, because you go make like 3 bottles for this long ride. Sometimes you make them the night before. If you're trying to be like managing time, then you go do this. You got to wait for the ride, do the ride, come back from the ride. Now you're exhausted, or you prioritize your bike, or maybe you were rescuing someone from a trail who was abandoned by the other riders at the World Championships. And the last thing on your mind is those bottles. So like that stuff sit in those bottles for like 4 straight days. And sometimes you come back to your bike and the bottle's still on your bike, and it still has the stuff in it from last time you rode your bike. That's not convenient. That is gross for sure.
Yeah.
A slider today, convenient or gross, right? Like convenient, like old pair of shorts that you took off yesterday and put on the hamper, and can't find new shorts. So you're just going to go, do you go old pair of shorts?
That's gross. All right. So that's gross. All right. Gross? So what do you got?
Hey, I'm just saying convenient or gross. Like, how about those days when you have to do like a second swim workout? So you got to go put on your bathing suit, but you have one suit you really like. So you got to put the same bathing suit back on again, and it's not dry yet. It's technically clean because it's in the chlorine, is that convenient or is it gross? For me, it may be clean, but I tell you, put on a wet bathing suit, it feels super gross. Like even right now, I'm kind of creeped out. I'm going to put that on the gross side for me. How about you?
Definitely. Yeah. Both. Yeah. Both. Gross. Yeah. Definitely both.
You probably have more than one Speedo.
Would not swim
really
twice.
don't.
Just to not do that. I would avoid swimming twice.
You're just not. I'm a little bit, as you know, I'm a little bit OCD. So if I'm swimming and I'm like, oh, it was a good swim, I'd much rather like go back that same day. I'm like, oh, I got to swim 5K this week. I'll do another one this afternoon because I was excited about it and I'll just do it. Like if I've got to like get unexcited about swimming, wait 4 days and try and get excited again, like why? Like I'm kind of fired up about swimming right now. Like I might as well just go swim again right now. So yeah, I often run into that trouble. Or here's another gross thing that you may need to use it on. Let's think of all the things you could use your RicePaste on. What about your heart rate monitor strap? That thing is hella gross. Have you tried? Like every once in a while, I'm like, I got to put my heart rate monitor back on. So I'm like, ooh, the strap is a little wet from the shower I took this morning. So I'm going to just, take it and like squeeze it between the two edges of my towel just to kind of dry it off. I'm like, I'll just dry off the strap, get the moisture out, like dry it off. And I look at my towel. My towel is like brown. I'm like, what? I've been rinsing this thing off. Totally gross, like completely gross. But apparently that's okay. So I probably could use your RicePaste on my heart rate monitor, right?
Yeah, maybe.
How about
maybe?
How about your bike shoes after a race? Would you go after that with RicePaste?
Holy smokes! No, I just would leave the RicePaste leave the RicePaste to the bottles and stuff like that. Everything else just gets regular soap. Yeah.
Really? All right. Yeah. But you already said that the dishwasher's not going to do the bottles. Like, how's it going to clean your cycling shoes? Right? Like, I mean,
it's just my excuse to buy another pair of cycling shoes that I really wanted anyway.
I like how your emotional attachment to your bottles is so high that you're like, I will go through iterations and find it and solve it. So I save this, $25 water bottle, but your cycling shoes that are like $450, you're like, oh, screw those things. Get a new pair. I need a new pair.
That is equally as cool for another $450. Why would that? Probably going to save me seconds in the next race.
Okay, then I'm digging in more deep. Those of you who've never ridden with Matt before, Matt is super matchy. Like from the socks to the kit to the whole, he does it right for sure. Like even if I owned all the gear to be super matchy, I can't find it when I want to go for that ride, which pisses me off more because I'm like, these black socks are so weak. I know I have a pair of socks that are much more boss than this. I don't know where they are. I need a separate drawer for just the cool stuff that I want to wear. Maybe I should put it all together when I do my laundry. So I'm curious, these water bottles, are they just conveniently large and hold fluids, or are they also kind of matchy like with the bike and they look better with the bike?
Oh, I think at one point they were matchy, but I think I'm losing probably cool points over my bottles because they've been abused by the bottle cages. But yeah, I don't know. I just like them. I don't know. Those are just the ones I like to use. So I wanted to, But yeah, you gotta have good sock game though. Yeah, that's for sure. But I guess I need to up my bottle game. But
yeah.
I guess I'm spending all my money on shoes, so apparently I can't buy bottles.
Bottles, right? You gotta feel that pinch somewhere, right? Like, come on, who knows, right? Okay, all right, good to know. All right, thank you for the.
What do you got? What were your topics?
My two topics were one. How We Train podcast with Messick from Ironman, which was a brutal listen if you've listened to it, where Jack Ryan, the host of the How We Train or How They Train podcast, interviews Ironman CEO Andrew Messick about what's going on with Ironman, asks him some tough questions, some repetitive questions as well. We can go into that whole style, but that was kind of hard to see or listen to, I should say. I felt like I was seeing it because I was kind of wincing when I was listening. And then not even sexy at all, but I get this question all the time, which is indoor versus outdoor mileage, whether you're running or cycling or swimming, like what's the discount? Everybody assumes that there's a discount. If I'm riding outside, I need to ride 3 hours. Do I just ride inside for 2 hours? Because 2 hours inside is like 3 hours outside. Is that just a mental game that we play with ourselves, or is there some real sort of validity behind that? So those are my two topics. One sort of like, oh boy. And the other one sort of like, What are you thinking? What are you going for?
Let's do a quick round on Andrew, and then we'll do the indoor because I think folks will want to hear a little bit of both. Let's see if we can do a quick round on Andrew.
All right, time check. We're at 13 minutes right now. We promised folks we would cap it at 30. All right, so the podcast. So the How They Train podcast, I've only listened to a few episodes. Jack does a really nice job. He interviews sort of elite triathletes and performers and coaches around the world, and really asks the questions that you yourself would probably ask. You see someone go by and you're like, how are you so fast? And like the person's answer would be like, I train. Or I was born this way, but he actually gets down to the nitty gritty. Like, okay, so you train, like, what do you train? How about Tuesday? How about Tuesday last week at 6 a.m.? Right. And then afterwards, what did you eat? And they'll be like, oh, I have my favorite dish. He's like, what's the dish? And they're like, it's this oatmeal. And he's like, where's that oatmeal sourced from? And he's like, oh, I get it at the store, and he's like, do you open the package by ripping it or do you cut it and then tape it back later? He gets into everything. So you know all the things about these athletes by the time you're done. So it does a really nice job. Especially I recommend if you follow his podcast, which I do, that you just go find, because he'll do this to everybody, but find the athletes that you're really curious about, like either your heroes or people that you are really interested in, maybe a particular aspect of what their sport is, and dive into it. In this particular episode, he managed to get Andrew Messick on the phone, or on the Zoom, I guess, to interview him about Ironman and ask questions sort of related to the business model and what's happening. There's been a lot of friction with Ironman. I think we talked a little bit about it maybe in the last pod where they're splitting the Ironman World Championships. They oversubscribed it, and now they're sort of in this fallout where, to sum it up in a nutshell, basically Ironman took a lot of people's money for the World Championships and for other races as well, and didn't offer refunds. They just said, we'll just do the race later, which is one of the few, to just be clear to everyone out there who's like, sure, that's fine. It's one of the very, very, very few businesses in the pandemic that was like, we're not giving you your money back. We realize that you can't work. You're probably at home. You can't buy toilet paper. Times are tough. I know you gave us like $1,500. We're not giving it back to you. You'll get it at some undetermined future date. We promise. Trust us. Which is a strong move by a company in those times. I didn't certainly agree with it, as you can tell from my tone. I know Endurance Nation wise, we were like, whatever you need. I think we trained like over 100 people for free. We were just like, hey, if you are a frontline worker, you can train inside Endurance Nation for free, as our small contribution to help those folks stay sane. And so anyway, Ironman's got this debt essentially where they've got all these athletes that want to race. They have those athletes' money, but they're not necessarily getting new money because the people have already paid them. Who knows where that money went? But the question revolved more around, what about separating the races? Questions that revolved around the finances of Ironman, the role of pro triathletes, a lot of the business logistics and so on. And it's a tough listen because Andrew's obviously had a lot of media coaching and doesn't really want to talk about these things. I think, in fact, he actually ate his lunch on camera. From what Jack was saying, he was eating during the interview, which is that's so not disrespectful at all. And it was really tough. Did you actually get a chance to listen to it, Matt?
Yeah, I did.
Okay.
And he did a pretty good job. I mean, I guess we don't want to be too much of a spoiler, but they had a pretty good, I think, dialogue back and forth about the dynamics of choosing, a new location and going to two split location, two different races, stuff like that. And I thought he really, and they talk about the Kona and the city and the deal they had with the city, and then the city changed the deal. So, I mean, that's certainly disruptive to them. Mm-hmm. Part that I think was really hard to listen to was, like you kind of alluded to it at the beginning, was Jack, the interviewer, just he reattacks. He will ask a really good follow-up question, mm-hmm. and he really wanted an answer on, do we pay enough money to the pros? Are the pros mm-hmm. getting paid enough by Ironman? Mm-hmm. And he must have asked that question 4 different ways, 5 different times, and I think mm-hmm. that's the kind of the boiling point for Messick of like mm-hmm. he was going to dance around that question, and Jack was going to continue to ask it, and mm-hmm. they were in a kind of a standoff. He kind of blew through his time. So
he did,
which was unfortunate because he had some really good other questions that you as Ironman athletes would want to ask Messick. Like these are really good questions. And mm-hmm. he said he'd come back, but I'd be interested to see if he really would actually come back. But what did you think?
I think at the end when Andrew was signing off, I really enjoyed this podcast. I really, really enjoyed it. I think he was perhaps saying something else at that time. I agree with you. Definitely. He had a host of other questions that at the end when apparently Andrew Messick thought it was only a 45-minute call. They'd gone to 115. There was obviously some confusion. So unfortunately, Jack Ryan had kind of burned through a lot of his time. Like you said, he had other questions he wanted to get answered. I mean, I think it is an interesting question. And we kind of got into the debate a little bit inside Endurance Nation as well, which is like, well, what's the role, right? I thought Andrew had a really good sort of target or point, I should say, sort of about, hey, Ironman, when you can't compare Ironman to other sports like basketball or baseball, because those are spectator sports, and Ironman is a participation sport. It's participatory, right? People pay for the event to do it. They're not showing up to just watch it. So it's a different type of sport, which I don't disagree with at all. At the same time, like, it's really interesting. Like, I don't think you can still discount the role of stars or elites in the value of the event itself. I think one of the things that's unique about Ironman is that they've really hung their hat on, it's a race and there's pros here, and not, this is the tour, if you will, of like, Ironman could, in some alternate universe, could have been every year, here's the tour, here are the stars who are part of our tour for this year, who's going to show up in your town. You get to meet Rinny, at these 7 cities this year. She's going to be there signing autographs, meeting people, like, awesome. She's also going to be racing. If they're not racing, maybe they're emceeing or doing some other version of it. And there's some, you could imagine like a stable, much like the only example I can come up with is like professional wrestling, right? Where there's different athletes are participating on different days, but they're all sort of part of the crew that are funded and kind of do the rounds. I do believe that pro athletes play a large role in the excitement level of the sport, right? They certainly help the sponsors and they help the visibility of the sport. Especially now that social media, back in the day, there was really nothing aside from magazines. So I could see that. But now social media wise, the elites do a fair amount of sort of, sharing out and broadcasting. And for sure, the sponsors are paying for some of that for sure. But the issue that I get to when people say like, the sponsors, like if you're not in the top 5 in the world, you're really, unless you happen to know someone in your country that does a thing and makes a bike that's a new brand that wants to sponsor you, which probably just means a bike, doesn't mean a lot of money. When you get down to it, and some of the pros have done it, they do the math on the money they get from their sponsors and the travel obligations they have and the race entries they have to go to and their pro fee. These men and women, these athletes are not making any money. Like, they're just barely, unless, again, like I said, you win or you're a repeat champion or you're in that top sort of 3 high visibility level. It's just not happening. Like, it's not. And I think that's why you see the turnover right now. Back in the day, it was really easy for pros to qualify. You just had to finish the race essentially. If there were 3 pro women at Lake Placid that year, there were going to be 3 on the podium, and they would go to Kona. Like, it was pretty easy. Now they've got a point system. There's a lot more pros, but as a result, for example, on the women's side, some of these women have to do 6 or 7 Ironman races in a year to earn enough points to get into Kona to race, right? So they got to go to 7. I'm just going to 7 countries on like a minuscule budget. When you're training all the time, you're eating like 17 children. Your bottles are full of molds. You can barely breathe, right? All their podcasts are full of angry interviewers, and you've got to go like try and race against all these people across the globe. Keep your equipment together, right? If you can afford to even pay a mechanic, and then hopefully you earn enough points to get into Kona to then try and race there. But by the time you get there, you're freaking exhausted because you've done 7 Ironman races in a year. And if you're in the top 10, I think the top 10 get an automatic invite back. I can't remember. But if you're in the top 10 or in a top 5, whatever, there's like it's a lot easier. If you're already winning, like it's stacked, right? It's like playing shoot around with your friends, right? Like, winners get the ball, right? It's like, you make it, you take it. It's like, oh, great. So you get the ball again. You get to go back again. I have to go back to the grind and try and do all of this. And I think that's why you see such a high level of churn. If people can't get on the fast track of that treadmill fast enough, they're not going to stick around. So I don't know how you feel about that on the pro side.
I think it is really hard for them to make a living at the sport. And he brings that out kind of in the interview of how it is hard, all the points that you bring out. And I think, Messick, I don't want to spoil it for the folks that, I just want to make it a teaser for them to listen to it also.
Right.
I mean, I think he does a pretty good job of defending Ironman as a business. And like I said, I think the quality part of the interview was really about when he talks about like how they're working with Kona and the impacts with the city and stuff like that, about like just the pure mechanics of pulling off that double race thing was not going to really work for the city for the long term. And they needed to come up with some answers and stuff like that. I thought that was a really good interview. I think he really drove the interview and some pretty good questions there and stuff like that. And then and I think he asked some out of the box questions. Well, did you consider this? And did you consider that? And like Andrew gets a little twitchy at that point, for some of those. But he does answer them, until he got up at the end. But.
Yeah, it's super. I guess it's super interesting to me also that like, I'm surprised Andrew did the podcast, like he's got to know it's going to be a tough interview regardless. And that, these are just tough times, right? Ironman is a privately held company. They don't have to disclose their financials. They don't, the only time you get to see Ironman's financials is when they sell, and then you can look at participation rates. You can do the math sort of back of the envelope and try and figure things out. But it's, I guess the downside for me as a longtime athlete, with Ironman is just like, I feel like they could have been more intentional about how they were going to build things out. They do a good job of reacting, right? They spun the split race as like, hey, we're all about making sure more women can race. But it wasn't really, that's not, as far as I know, it wasn't like, how do we solve this issue of not having enough participation and better exclusivity for women? Their hand was forced, and this was like a solution they came up with. And they've spun it as this is really beneficial. But like, the 50 women that Kona issued been around for a couple of years. People have been seeking, some version of pay equality. Like there was a lot of challenging issues. And I feel like in many ways, triathlon is at the cutting edge of sport, like in terms of gear, experimentation. The triathletes in the town do the stuff first before the runners in the town, before the cyclists in the town. Like we're sort of that bleeding edge. And it's on some level, I feel like it's, there's like a missed opportunity there that Ironman could also collectively sort of be on some of the cutting edge elements of the sports. And I don't think it would necessarily really affect their bottom line, but it kept the sport, more in the news and more relevant per se. Not that I have there's no one great solution to the, where do you go from Kona thing. But we've known for over a decade that Kona was in trouble, and it wasn't working. Just as a business, if you're trying to grow a business and that like the thing that everybody tries to get to is capped at like 2,000 athletes ish, until we can start like building a parking garage and sticking people in it, it's really hard to sort of like, I think that's sort of the writings on the wall. If you know that your biggest revenue event will only ever have 2,000 people in it, if the U2 knows that like the biggest concert hall they can play is just 2,000 people, they're like, yikes, those tickets have to be like, $40,000 each to make it the same as, Yankee Stadium or somewhere else. Like people just solve those issues differently. So anyway, it's a good podcast. You can go to like How They Train. If you look up How They Train on Instagram, or How They Train podcast on Instagram, or How They Train, I think it's Podbean, like a bean, .com is where I found the podcast there, or just Google Jack Ryan, How They Train. You can download the episode and listen to it. I think it's a great listen just to kind of get the intersection of business and sport a little bit, from the business side, not just from a sponsor side, and just kind of get a sense of the personalities of people who are running. Andrew's been around for a long, long time inside our space, and has really sort of shaped the direction of Ironman. He's transitioned through several owners. And I hope that, despite my sort of criticisms, I hope the sport does continue to find a home. I think there are some parts about our sport, like the fact that stuff costs so much money and the races cost so much money and the bar to get in is so high. I don't know what that looks like in the future, but I hope collectively we find a way, because it's a phenomenal sport. It's so accessible for people of, different ability levels in different sports, et cetera, but if everything costs like $400 to do, it's a tough one. So anyway, I digress. All right. Maybe not as juicy as we wanted to, but there you go. Okay. All right. We've got like a couple minutes left. So we'll pivot. We'll talk about the discount. Indoor mileage, outdoor mileage. And we could talk, we could talk bike and run and swim, and we could just talk bike or run or whatever it is. But the question I often get asked is, people will say, all right, so I would love to be outside this weekend. Coach, you gave me a 4-hour ride, but I've got to ride inside. Ooh. Ooh, 4 hours inside sounds not fun. I've heard, I don't know if you heard this, Coach, but I've heard that like 3 hours inside is worth like 4 hours outside. Like, can I do the 3 hours inside and get the same value being outside? Because it's tough. And so, I wanted to open it up. What does Matt say about the discount? Is there a discount for those indoor miles or outdoor miles, I should say, like that indoor miles are harder to get? Or is it the inverse? Am I getting it wrong? Are indoor miles too easy? Biking on Zwift is just so easy. Your avatar is always happy. There's no traffic lights. Everybody's high-fiving and saying, you look great, ride on. It makes it so much easier if you're riding outside when everybody's like, hey, you jackass, get off the road. And like, throwing urine-filled moldy bottles at you. All right, what do you got?
I'd say there is a discount to riding inside. I think you do get a discount, but I think it's also relative to where you are in your season. Ooh. So like if you're early in your season, or if you're in a general prep period and stuff like that, you probably get a, let's just say you get a 0.8 discount. It's 80% of whatever the outside ride would have been or something. Okay. Say 0.8. I'll say 0.8. Throw that out. And then, but I'd say the closer you get to your event, if you're like an inside athlete and you're going to go to, you're going to go to Ironman Texas and you got to do a lot of that stuff in the northern hemisphere inside, then at some point you have to put the time in on the bike at that distance and stuff like that. So I do think, a lot of outdoor riding could be coasting, if you're not on the pedals all the time, and then there's traffic lights and all that other stuff like that. So when you're on Zwift, you stop pedaling, your little guy stops moving, right? He just starts waiting for you again. So I do think there is but it is so mentally demanding to do 4 hours inside. I mean, that is like, I'm not sure that's really worth it. It's only worth the cost if it's part of your race build. I would say it that way. How about that?
All right. Yeah. I mean, people who ride extensively indoors are idiots for sure. And I don't know anybody who spends that much time indoors.
I wouldn't know anybody like that. I
wouldn't know anybody like that on Zwift who talks to more people on Zwift.
Who would want 12 weeks of workouts every Tuesday and Thursday built into Zwift for them? I don't know.
Who would want those custom workouts? Like, that's crazy town, and Discord where you could talk to other people. That's just dumb. And meetups where you just ride with the people stop. I do agree with you. And I like the seasonality approach you talk about. I do talk about with athletes as well. I think the only sort of wrinkle I'll throw in there is depending where the athlete, what the goals are for the season. Like I think the indoor training can be really beneficial in terms of the simplicity of training. So while my bias would be like, hey, spend more time outside, get fun, comfortable, manipulating your bike, handling your bike. Like for most triathletes and most beginner athletes, just knowing how to ride the bike is a challenge, right? So indoors, you just don't really get any of that. And anybody who rides indoors and then goes outside has to sort of relearn those things over time. Like riding your bike outside is a ton of fun. But there's just a lot more things going on, right? You have to be paying attention to. So there's some value to that. At the same time, the flip side of that is, inside, my bike is there. My water bottles that are full of, sugary stuff, just building mold or just sitting there for the whole week, just waiting to poison me. My food's there. I just got to turn on my computer and I can ride away. And that's all I have to do. Whereas if I want to ride outside, I have to go to the closet. I have to find the socks that don't match anything else. I got to find the gear. Then I got to think about a base layer, and it's windy. I need a vest, but not that vest. That vest is like too big and kind of also not matchy. But at this point, who gives? But it's flappy, So I can do not matchy and snug, but I can't do not matchy and flappy. Like that's too bad. I'm like, that's going to drive me insane because it's going to sound like a ripped sail as I'm riding down the road. So I'm like, I can't wear that one. Where's the other one? Then I get downstairs and I'm like, where are my gloves? Like I forgot my gloves. My gloves are upstairs. I'm already fully dressed, like completely sweating bullets inside. And you got to go back upstairs to find those stupid gloves. So all of that, like, unless you're really organized and know what you're doing, that's like a 45-minute exercise to like detach yourself from your house to just be riding your bike. Whereas for me, I'm like, I could be riding right now. I could have been riding 40 minutes ago, which is like, that just kills me. And I love riding outside. I think there's some value in the time spent training, like you said, and for people who have that internal resistance where they're just like, I really don't want to train today. Like, I think the complexity around getting outside and doing all those right choices, unless you're good at it, which we get better at it across the season because we ride outside once and then we love it. And then, we get better, so by the time like July, August comes, you're a machine. but that does take time. The other piece of it too is you can be, these days, you can definitely be a lot more specific with your trainer workouts too. So now with the erg mode, you can do a lot of simulation work so you can mimic the terrain you would have had outside. And a lot of our athletes have had success with that. So even if you may live in a flat area, you may choose to use your indoor trainer to train for a hilly race because you can in some ways simulate the climbing portion, or, at the 90-minute mark, you can do, 30 minutes of this type of work by using the computer to generate that for you. Whereas at your, in the old days, you'd be like, you have got the perfect loop. It's 8 miles. There's only 4 stop signs, 2 yield signs, and a senior citizen center. But if I go at 11, they're all on the bus to the supermarket. They're not back till like 11:35, and I can ride around that thing super duper fast and only have to scream like, look out, like 3 times. And then I can get my intervals done. It's perfect. Yeah, you kind of get to avoid all of that madness. Remember those days where you'd be like, this is the perfect loop. And then you're like, it's only 17:43. And I was going to do an 18-minute interval. Now I got to find 17 seconds somewhere. Those days are long gone. So
you like to give a discount for the longer ride inside? Is that what you're saying then? What do you think your discount rate is?
Yeah, I would usually, I think the 1/5 is kind of a good marker to have, 20% off, so I would say like, hey, if you're, and the other option I give people is if you are, depending the goal. So this is the only other vector there for me is the goal. So if you say you've got a 4-hour ride inside, say it's your every 4 weeks or so, we usually have a bigger ride inside Endurance Nation, like an easier ride, but longer. So say it's 4 hours. I'd be like, hey, take 20% off of that bad boy. You can even go 25%, I guess, if you're really struggling. You can get 3 hours inside, pretty close. If your goals are high, though, if you're like new or returning to fitness, whatever, be fine. But if your goals are higher, then I say you can go the 25%. But then we got to pick up the intensity a little bit. Maybe we start using some lower gear work. Maybe we do a little bit of sort of upper zone 2 or low zone 3 work. So not too hard, but we get to the training stress that we would have had in the 4-hour ride or closer to it in that 3-hour period, just to sort of still have the adaptation we're looking for. Macro wise, it's not perfect, but it's pretty close. So that's the only sort of wrinkle that I put in there for those folks. Yeah. So
did you get a discount rate for running treadmill versus outside?
Ooh, I don't think so, because I don't know how other people feel about this on the run, but I run slower on a treadmill. Like I run way faster in real life. But on the treadmill, like running 730s on the treadmill is like murder for me. But outside, I can run that same RPE is like 7s, and I'm like, do. Like for whatever reason it is, running on the treadmill is harder for me and I'm slower. So I don't discount the time because I'm actually going not as far, if that makes sense. Like I get mad because I would normally do 8 miles, say, in an hour, but here I'm only doing like 7.25, but I'm still at an hour, so I'm like, it's fine. I'm not going to go to the 8 miles because then I got to be on there for like 1:08 and 13 seconds, which is too far on a treadmill. Like I'm just going to cut it. But I do cheat because I've got my Zwift setup is the engine and the treadmill setup is the caboose inside my garage. So if I put my glasses on with my awesome sweat headband, maybe one day we'll do our favorite training photo picture. We'll bring those out. I can see the TV that's normally in front of my Zwift setup from the treadmill. So I can turn on. Lately, I've been watching some Mission Impossible action and get my Tom Cruise fix while I'm running on the treadmill as well. So that kind of keeps me a little distracted. Otherwise, if I just have to stare at the treadmill and count those blinking red dots, it drives me insane. It's too much.
There's a weird space-time continuum for me on the treadmill. Something happens there that like I'm running and it was 3 minutes so far and I looked down 45 seconds. But I think if you run like the treadmill at like 1 or 2% grade, I think it feels to me very similar to what you're running outside. If I just give it just a little bit of elevation, and then, like you said, I think the time is time. And then just with a little bit of elevation, I feel like it feels very similar to running outside. It doesn't have to be crazy. But even that 1 or 1.5% or something like that, I think makes a difference.
Yeah. No, I'd be down with that. Now, how about, last one, since we're here, we might as well just do it. What about on the swim? For those of us like who have a indoor swim machine or you've got the cords or whatever, if you were going to do like, oh, I got this hour swim today, but I can only be on the Vasa, or I'm going to use these cords or something like that. How do you handle that version of it, right? Like for me, those things are much harder than actual swimming, right? There's the swimming, you're flip turning or pushing off a wall, and there's a lot of gliding in swimming, no gliding with the cords or the Vasa. So for me, I have no problem like dialing that bad boy way down, but I'm curious to know what you think.
I have not Vasa or indoor swimmed. So
you have not lived.
And I know I haven't, I can't do the cords. The cords just don't do it for me. I just like, it just doesn't feel like swimming when that cord whips back after I like, I can get some resistance, through the pull, but then like when that cord, starts to get shorter again, that doesn't feel like swimming to me. Plus I'm kind of in a weird half bent over position. It's really odd for me. I can't, I don't get much out of it. If I wanted to do something for swimming, I would just do the push-ups or something like that, or just do the dips just to get the muscle activation or something like that. Just to keep the upper body, feeling like I did something if I wanted the upper body activation. But like, I can't, I'm not a swim cord guy. What about you? I know you got the Vasa, but can you do both Vasa and what do you think? What's your opinion on Vasa and swim cords?
So the cords for me are just travel related. If I go to the in-laws or if I'm on the road, I'll bring the cords with me just as an upper body workout. Like you said, something I need to do something when I'm on the road. And if I don't have, there's not a good hotel gym or I'm going to be on a tight schedule, the cords are, you can do a bunch of different stuff with them. You can do the bent over, this is me pretending to swim kind of thing, but you can also use them for, shoulder raises, bicep curls, seated rows. You can do all sorts of stuff with cords, tricep extensions, biceps. So they're just a good travel tool to have. But to your point, I've never really tried to mimic a swim workout. In general, if I had to, I would do probably intervals for time, so it'd be like, hey, if I normally swim like a 130, 100, I would be like, okay, I'm going to do, 90 seconds of this work. And then I'm going to take, 30 seconds of rest and then come back and try and do that a couple of times. But I don't really see it's a muscle activation thing. It's not a swim technique thing. On the Vasa, I kind of do the same thing we talked about on the bike, which is I tend to do shorter, harder stuff on the Vasa, like in the early parts of the season. And then as I get closer to the race, I'll just do it for time. So I ended up doing in the past training for Ironman races. Like I would like 3 or 4 times a week, I would just go down there and do it for an hour, just like steady state, go for an hour. I'd, bring my iPad down there, watch a show, put my headphones in, whatever. And it was a straight, like not even a skill stuff. And my skills are fairly decent in the water. I'm like 105 swimmer typically or something like that in a wetsuit. So for me, it was just, how do I make myself not get tired? In the swim, like if I could just reduce the fatigue component of that. So then I'm like, oh, great. I can move my arms for an hour and then I can do the stuff that I love to do on the bike and the run. I was like, oh, that's great. Like there's no work. Whereas in the past when I would really be focused on swim technique. I would do lots of skills and drills, et cetera. And, that makes your workout go really long, which is fine. I end up swimming 2,750 or 3,000 or whatever it is, but I didn't actually, it's not even close to what I'd be doing in a race. Like, and I really, in the early stages of my career as compared to later when I had the Vasa, I don't think I ever made myself that tired. I don't think I swam enough. I think I usually typically swam twice a week, sometimes 3. I think if I swam 4 or 5 times a week, or if I was doing 4K or maybe even 5K workouts for an Ironman, I would get to the place of fatigue in a general session that would mimic the fatigue I'd have in a race. But in race consistently, I remember being like, oh, I'm tired right now. I'm having trouble just organizing my arms, like what are they doing? Right. They're just going around. Like they're not even really doing the swim thing. And I had never been there in my training. So the Vasa definitely helps from that regard, not to be like a commercial, but that definitely has been a net positive for me. So a little bit of the discount early in the season. If people say they're on the Vasa, the workouts are much shorter. And most athletes, we have a Vasa supplement inside the team for athletes who have a Vasa. They're generally not happy about it. They're like, wait, it's January, my race is in 6 months, and the workout is, warm up 5 minutes and do 20 by 50 or 10 by 100. Like I want to swim for 45 minutes. I'm like, that's not what the Vasa is for. Like you'll get exhausted, particularly for lighter athletes, women or super lightweight men. Like it's the pulley mechanism is work, and if you're tinier, you generally can move through the water a lot faster than someone my size. I'm used to, I don't even fit inside this box I'm in right now on the camera. Like at least you fit inside the box. Like I'm stuck. I'm like, oh, I'm so huge that like I have to put out a lot of work. So I'm used to doing the work, and there's a correlation for me. But for most people, they're just like, this is exhausting, So I think you have to be really strategic when you start getting into the non-water swim math to make sure that you're not overdoing it until, to your point, with the bike, you're closer to the race, and then spending the time is just as important as work. So, yeah.
So you get discount indoors on the bike, and then relative to when you're in your season or not. So your discount expires the closer you get closer to your race.
Exactly.
And then for running, it seems like your duration is duration, and you just got to get over the ego that you didn't run as fast. And then you get a discount on Vasa, but that also expires then the closer you get to your race. It's time in the water matters.
That's right. That's right.
By that.
Yeah. And my ego, the biggest ego is the run for me, where I'm like, this is not making me happy. Like even early in the season, you want to know my super double top secret piece? In the early season, if I'm coming, I know, totally lean in, everybody. So when I'm early in the season, particularly if I've raced, like let's say I've raced in the fall, big race, took like a month off, not running and just healing, whatever. And then I come back to running. I'm obviously like everybody else, not as fast, and easily tired. But I can't run like a slow mile. I get myself mad, So I literally used to go out and like run the mile that I wanted to run until I couldn't run it anymore. And then I would stop my watch. And then I would walk like 30 seconds, and then I'd be like, all right, boop. And then I would run again. And I'd be like, 1 mile, boop, and I'd be like, okay, 7-minute mile. I did it in 10 minutes, and I had a 2-minute walking break in the middle of it, but I couldn't run and be like, I just ran a 10-minute mile because I'm not in shape. I was like, oh, hell no. We're not doing that. And I would find any reason. I'd be like, oh, I think that's a hill I'm running up right now. It's totally not a hill, right? Like it's just the house is like shorter than the other house. So I'm like, I must be going up because the top of the house is at the top of the house. And I'd be like, beep, boop, beep, boop, beep, boop, or I'd like run past people and they'd be like, oh, hey, nice to see you back at it, Patrick. And I'm like, what's up? Like super cool. And then I'd like turn the corner like behind a tree and be like, boop. And I'm like, just like gasping. You're like, oh my God, how do I do this every year? It's terrible. And I'm like, look around. I'm like, nobody sees me. And I'm like, boop, and then I keep going just like that. So yeah, I've got my run ego will be a problem and has been a problem. In fact, when I talk about recovery, the number one thing that I've changed in my training in the last 5 years, people say, oh, you're so much faster on the bike or whatever, has been just getting used to not running so fast all the time. Because my ego was like, why are you not running sub 7? And then why aren't you running sub 655? Why aren't you running sub 650? Like, why are you so slow? So.
I used to have a quote that says you don't need to do anything flashy on the run. And I didn't really get that until I was like, oh, if I'm running slower, then I can do more work over the entire week than if I just did it during this run, like less flashy on the run. But like you said, sometimes you get too tied into the numbers identify you as I'm an XX runner. If I run any slower than that, it doesn't count. But,
right. Yeah. I think people on the bike, they get that whole like I'm coasting or it's up or it's down or there's wind or no wind or tailwind or I think it's a lot harder for people to be that rigid, but on the run you can be super rigid, and that's where
you're catching it sometimes. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we'll dive into that next episode maybe. All right, okay, this has been awesome. Not as sexy as the first Dude Guy podcast because obviously 2 dude guys talking on a podcast is crazy, interesting, and sexy. But we did cover some good topics today from RicePaste and the value it has for the bottles that you love. We talked about Andrew Messick without really ruining it, and the interview with Jack Ryan on how we train. We talked about discounting time, indoor training versus outdoor training, and the questions we have. So we'll be back. We're going to try every 2 weeks. Is that the plan? Do a podcast. bring some topics. For those of you who are listening and want to send in some topics, do it. Hit us on social media, or if you're inside the team, send us a DM. Let us know if there's some topic you want us to cover and get into. And let's give a shout out. He's not going to hear this because we won't publish it in time, but Scott Imlay, right? He's out racing right now somewhere. Is he doing 100 somewhere?
Oh, yeah. At least 100, if not more.
Yeah, man doesn't stop. First ultra run of the year for the team. He's already out there getting it done. His pictures are incredible. I don't know how he takes such great pictures while also, doing a race. But shout out to him and to all those early season athletes getting it done. All right. Peace. Here, let me hit the stop recording button and recording.
For more information about Endurance Nation, visit us online at endurancenation.us. The provided music is from the Podshow Podsafe Music Network. Check it out at music.podshow.com.